"Mom is coming here tomorrow," Simon said. "What do you mean, coming?" I asked. "It means we're going to live together," he replied.
What?
"But what about your father's house? There are so many things that need to be done, like selling it or demolishing it, right?" I panicked when my husband suddenly suggested living together with his mom, trying to explain how unrealistic it was. However, he was determined. "That's why Mom is coming here first while we proceed with those arrangements. We decided last night after discussing it." That's absurd. I felt dizzy. Why does my husband always decide things on his own? "And what about your mother's room?" "We don't have a spare room," I said. "Then clear out your room by tomorrow," he demanded. "Don't be so unreasonable. This is our home. Why are you trying to let your mother live here without asking?" "Shut up. I pay the $1,000 rent, so just do as I say. My name is Tanya, and I'm 34 years old. I run a general store. My store is modestly situated on the outskirts of town and operates with the support of local regular customers. This small shop has a homey atmosphere, creating a deep bond between the staff and the customers. I'm very comfortable with the warm and intimate atmosphere of the current shop, and I have no intention of expanding it significantly. I'm satisfied with this scale and want to maintain it as it is. On the other hand, my husband, Simon, is always ambitious, always trying something new. He always sets high goals, and his proactive attitude sometimes overwhelms those around him. Our personalities are very different, which often surprises our friends as to why our relationship works so well. However, I feel that the contrast in our personalities actually complements and functions well together. "Hey, are you still cleaning? We have plans this afternoon. Will you make it on time? Don't you have other things to do? The departure time is approaching, you know." As usual, Simon couldn't hide his frustration when things didn't go according to plan. "Come on, don't worry so much. It's a relaxing family day out today, so a little delay won't hurt," I calmly replied. "What are you talking about? You always move at your own pace too much. What tasks are still left?" Simon pressed further. "Could you please pack our daughter's things in her usual bag then?" I asked gently. "Fine. Really, you," he said with a wry smile as he went to get our daughter's belongings. Watching his retreating figure, I secretly smiled. My husband, who prioritizes efficiency, gets irritated when I work at a relaxed pace, but this ultimately helps me. He might think he's taking care of me, but in reality, I'm skillfully managing him. His tendency to rush things is significantly influenced by his job and sales at an IT company. In this industry, a moment's delay could give competitors a significant advantage, so he's always chasing results and has very little tolerance for minor mistakes. As a result, he manages himself with a strict eye in his daily work, constantly working under pressure to achieve team goals. While our relationship as a couple is smooth, if we were to work together, our different work styles could be a significant barrier. I feel that my relaxed working style suits me, and I wouldn't function well in an environment that demands the speed that my husband does. In this regard, my father would be a better partner for my husband than I would. My father has been passionate about automobiles since he was young and has built a career as a craftsman in that field. He owns a small building in the town center, where he runs an automobile-related business. When my husband and I first considered marriage, I brought him to first meet my father. That day, they got so caught up talking about work rather than our marriage. That event was 3 years ago, and the memory of that day is still vivid in my mind. "Hey Dad, I've brought Simon along," I said when we arrived. "Ah, just a minute," my father responded. When we arrived home, my father was working on a car and was covered in oil. It was the first time Simon had encountered this scene, and he was a bit overwhelmed by the atmosphere of our home. Our house also serves as my father's auto shop, with many cars neatly arranged for sale on the property, and a two-story building standing in one corner. The first floor of the building is used as an office and repair area, and the upper floor houses the living space. My mother is inside, so go ahead and enter. I urged my husband. "Wait for me, I'll be right there," my father said, appearing at the entrance of the garage and wiping his hands with a blackened work towel. He then paused, slowly walked towards Simon and me, and greeted us with a firm gaze. His expression seemed ready to welcome a new member to the family. Since the entrance to our house is at the back of the building, we had to head outside first. Once outside, the cars lined up for sale came into view again. Wow, this is incredible. To have such a wonderful car dealership in the city center? You bought the land and building too, right? It must have been a lot of hard work and effort. Simon remarked admiringly to my father. Actually, it naturally happened as I worked with passion on cars. I acquired the land and building quite a long time ago, before prices soared. My father began to explain. His words were tinged with years of experience and solid confidence. "It's really impressive. That's forward-thinking action. Have there been any changes in car sales?" Simon inquired with keen interest. "Yes, lately, cars for collectors sell well. The value of old models has skyrocketed. Sure, there are many stylishly designed cars, but I never imagined when I was young that people would buy cars at high prices just to look at them and not drive them on the roads," my father explained. His voice conveyed a complex mix of emotions, blending adaptation to changes in the industry. "I see. That's a significant change," Simon responded. He was clearly impressed. Simon was very interested in my father's stories and actively bombarded him with questions. However, my father did not seem to mind, and he answered politely, as if dealing with a customer. From this conversation, it was clear that their professional interests and passions aligned. It seems that my father also easily switches on when it comes to work. My mother and I are not very knowledgeable about cars, so he must be pleased that Simon shows such an interest. I know all too well that once my father and husband start talking, there's no stopping them. While the two of them were engrossed in conversation, I went up the stairs at the back of the building and entered the room alone. After explaining the situation to my mother, we watched my husband and father chatting happily from the window and couldn't help but laugh. It's amazing they got along so well the first time they met. Really, he might become just like your father in the future. Ahaha. You'll have to keep an eye on that. This is a fond memory from when we had our marriage greetings. We currently live in the residential space above the car shop that my father used to run. Recently, having turned 65, my father closed the car shop and moved to the countryside with my mother. After working nearly 40 years in the city center, they plan to enjoy a rural life together. Thanks to the success of the car shop, my father has enough funds to not worry about future living expenses and decided to semi-retire. When my father decided to move, the family home was left vacant, and he suggested we might live there. Dad has offered us the house to use. What do you think? A. Are you going to sell the house or rent it out? Well, according to Dad, dealing with selling or renting out the house is too much hassle, so if we live there, he plans to eventually pass it on to us. So you mean to inherit the house and land? That's right. The whole process is just too much hassle for him. He's been focused on his work for 40 years and doesn't want any more complications. I see. Maybe him giving you the house now is part of decluttering his life, to not make it too burdensome for him. So how much is the rent? The rent is $1,000. That house was a spacious 3-bedroom, right? For $1,000, that's a pretty good deal. It's close to the city center and has good access to the station. Since Noelle is still a baby, maybe we should consider moving. Hearing that the rent was $1,000, my husband became more open to the idea of moving. My husband has a somewhat high self-esteem. I was concerned that living in my family home might make him feel dependent on my parents, and he might refuse to move. However, once the move was settled, I felt relieved. This allowed my parents to make their decision to move to the suburbs with peace of mind, resulting in a good outcome for everyone. But my husband presented one condition. I'm fine with moving, but I will pay the $1,000 rent myself. It's a decision I make as a man. Yes, I understand. Thank you, I replied. My husband was struggling to accept the idea of relying on my parents. Even though our finances were combined, he insisted on paying the rent himself. His unnecessary pride in such situations could be troublesome. As a result, we ended up living closer to the city center, and our life significantly improved. I was looking forward to more comfortable days ahead. However, since moving into the family home, my mother-in-law began visiting frequently, often staying over. It was natural for her to be interested now that her son and his wife had moved into a new home. But as her visits became weekly, it increasingly became a problem for me. Mother-in-law, you've been coming here almost every week recently, haven't you? You stay over and then go out by yourself, but maybe next time we could go out together, I suggested. Oh, don't worry about me. I want to enjoy some drinks with my friends, and they would feel awkward around you two, she replied. I felt she could be more considerate. Every week when she visited, I found it hard to relax. Lately, going to the theater has become her hobby, and she seems to enjoy it weekly with her friends. After the show, they discuss their thoughts at a restaurant. Since the theater is in the city center, she's essentially using our home as a place to stay. It's really okay, you don't need to worry, she would say. But then, emerging from a long bath, she'd casually eat the expensive ice cream I had bought as a little treat for myself. It was just a small indulgence for me, and I wished she would consider that. If she was worried about how her son was living or wanted to see her grandson, I could understand. But if she is using our house as a place to stay for her personal leisure, I find it hard to accept. So I brought up my mother-in-law's visits to my husband, and surprisingly, he supported her. Mom helps with the housework and even supports us with the kids. Can't you even allow her to go see a play for her hobby? No, I do appreciate the help she provides. But it's honestly exhausting when she comes over frequently without any real need. What? You're not grateful? If you have complaints, you should be perfect in housework, childcare, and your job, so there's nothing to criticize. It was clear that my husband didn't understand my feelings at all. He believed in voicing complaints only after achieving perfect results. This might be appropriate in a workplace, but applying it to family issues meant my feelings of distress were being ignored. Everyone has their limits of tolerance. Honestly, I think my mother-in-law's behavior is a bit unreasonable, even by general standards. The conversation made it clear that expecting my husband to side with me was unlikely. However, I couldn't just let it go. Ultimately, I decided to seek help from a specific person. As a result, my mother-in-law suddenly stopped coming over. Lately, Mom hasn't shown up at all, has she? My husband noted. Really? I replied. Did something happen? Maybe something did. I'm not sure of the reason. I responded to my husband's inquiries with a calm smile. The reason my mother-in-law stopped her visits was because my father-in-law spoke to her. He was a kind and courteous man, so I called him, explained the situation, and asked for help. My husband still doesn't know the real reason behind her cessation of visits, and my mother-in-law has kept that fact hidden. This way, our relationship as a couple wouldn't deteriorate. I'm truly grateful to my father-in-law. However, within a year, he passed away suddenly due to illness, and I was deeply saddened by the loss. I have been receiving help for issues with my husband and mother-in-law for nearly 5 years since we got married. My father-in-law was only 62 years old, and I had plans to repay him for his kindness. However, he passed away before I ever had the chance. At the funeral, while enduring regrets and sadness, I bid my last farewell to my father-in-law. After the ceremony, my daughter and I returned home first. Despite the great debt of gratitude I owed, I felt it was not right for me to stay with my mother-in-law and husband at my in-laws' house. It seemed that neither my husband nor my mother-in-law wanted that either, so I came back home with my daughter. However, the next night, my husband came home and made an unbelievable statement. "Mom is coming here starting tomorrow." Simon said. "What do you mean, coming?" I asked. "It means we're going to live together," he replied. "What? But what about your father's house? There are so many things that need to be done, like selling it or demolishing it." Right. I panicked when my husband suddenly suggested living together, trying to explain how unrealistic it was. However, he was determined. "That's why Mom is coming here first while we proceed with those arrangements. We decided last night after discussing it." That's absurd. I felt dizzy. Why does Simon always decide things on his own? "And what about your mother's room?" "We don't have a spare room," I said. "Then clear out your room by tomorrow," he demanded. "Don't be so unreasonable. This is our home. Why are you trying to let your mother live here without asking?" "Shut up. I pay the $1,000 rent, so just do as I say." "Are you kidding me? This isn't a joke." I had always avoided direct confrontation with Simon, who is stubborn and unyielding in his views, and instead found ways to skillfully manage his actions and thoughts. However, with the imminent start of life with my mother-in-law tomorrow, there will no longer be time to avoid conflict or subtly influence the situation. Simon seems to think only of the benefits of having another person to help with housework and childcare, completely disregarding my feelings. But it's too domineering for him to expect me to give up my private space for my mother-in-law. Moreover, while our conversation was still unresolved, Simon hurried off to take a bath. Any resistance from me seemed futile. I went to my workroom and decided to prepare a sleeping arrangement for my mother-in-law for the time being. The next day, my mother-in-law arrived, dragging a large suitcase. Usually I don't only bring one, but it's really tough to travel this far with so much luggage, she said. Since Simon was at work, I greeted her alone. The weight of her luggage must have been a considerable burden for her. She was sweaty and appeared exhausted. However, there was no sign of sadness for her husband, who had passed away just a few days ago. Had she already recovered? Or did she not feel sad at all? "Hey, isn't it cleared yet?" "I'm sorry. I was told last night by my husband to clear out the room." "Really useless, aren't you? Hurry up and clear it. Also, prepare some cold milk and cake." There was no cake in the fridge. When I said I would go out to buy some, my mother-in-law sighed. "Oh, what kind of housewife are you? Hurry up. Why do I have to be spoken to like this?" The thought of enduring days like this weighed heavily on me. But this was just the beginning. That evening, when Simon came home, the four of us were having dinner, and my mother-in-law escalated her attacks on me. "I haven't been here in a year, but it's still a nice house," she commented. "Yeah, Mom, why did you suddenly stop coming?" Simon asked. "Your father scolded me. He told me not to visit your place so often. He said it was because Tanya was feeling burdened." "Well, that sounds like Dad. Really, you didn't need to worry about it." "Actually, it wasn't your father who was considerate. It seems Tanya asked him to intervene. She told him she was bothered by my visits and asked a favor from him," my mother-in-law suddenly claimed, leaving me speechless. I had indeed sought help from my father-in-law. Of course I hadn't been rude. I had merely suggested subtly that she should limit her frequent visits. My mother-in-law seemed to be exaggerating the situation, making herself out to be a victim. "Hey, did you really say that?" "Tanya, I'm sorry. I had no idea I was such a burden. We'll be living together for a long time now. Is that okay?" My mother-in-law was smiling, but her eyes were hiding anger. It seemed she resented me for telling on her to my father-in-law. Her gaze clearly accused me. "Hey, answer me. Did you really say that?" "No, I didn't say it like that, but..." "Oh, is that so?" "My father said so. Are you saying he exaggerated the story, or are you implying Mom's lying?" "No, that's not what I meant." "But you did say it, right? Really? Doing things behind the scenes is sneaky. Now that we're living together, you should properly apologize to Mom." "Why should it be normal for me to apologize? That's ridiculous." "Mom, I'm sorry. It's my fault. I'll make sure she understands." I was completely made out to be the villain and pressured into apologizing, which was truly humiliating. This incident isolated me within my family, creating a 2-against-1 dynamic. The next day, blatant mistreatment by my mother-in-law began. In the morning, I made lunch for both my husband and me, but I found mine in the trash. When I returned home in the evening, my mother-in-law had prepared dinner, but nothing was set aside for me. Although my husband was aware of her actions, he fully supported his mother, only shrugging in response. I have been without support from anyone for a week now, and I can't even ask my father-in-law for help anymore. This obvious harassment has taken a significant mental toll on me. Some people endure such situations for years, even decades, but it seems I don't have the strength to bear it. When I saw my own limits, I found myself in a situation where I had no choice but to ask my mother-in-law for help. "Mother-in-law, could you please watch Noelle for a little while today?" I asked. "Why? Don't you usually take her to the shop with you?" she questioned. I have to attend a market event for work today. The venue is too large, and I can't bring her along, I explained. What? She'll start crying as soon as you leave. This is a bit. She hesitated. I'm really sorry. Is there any way you could help? I pleaded. You really are a troublesome daughter-in-law, always causing trouble. She sighed. I'm sorry, really sorry. I apologized to her repeatedly. I felt down in the morning, but I had to accept the situation. I was honestly anxious about leaving Noelle with my mother-in-law, but I wanted to believe she wouldn't do anything terrible to a 4-year-old. I told her I would return as soon as possible and left the house. In the evening, driven by worry, I hurried home. I didn't think anything serious would happen, but I needed to ensure Noelle was safe as soon as possible. I'm sorry I'm back now, I said upon entering the living room. My mother-in-law, engrossed in the television, merely lifted her hand without turning around and continued watching. She probably wanted to focus on her program. I looked around the living room for Noelle, but she was nowhere to be seen. Thinking she might have already gone to bed, I headed to the bedroom. However, Noelle wasn't there either, and I began to panic. I hurriedly rushed downstairs. There, in a place normally used as a storage room, my daughter Noelle was sitting and crying. Noelle! I called out. Mommy! She sobbed. What happened? Why are you here? I asked in shock. Grandma told me to reflect here because I couldn't eat her food, she explained. What? I was stunned by her words. It seemed my mother-in-law had locked Noelle in the cold, dark storage room as a form of discipline because she hadn't eaten her food. Mother-in-law. Why would you do this? How could you lock Noelle in such a place? It's cold, dark, and scary, I exclaimed, my anger rising. This could be traumatic for a child. I felt furious with my mother-in-law. There's no need to make a fuss. She didn't eat the soup I made. Picky eating isn't good, she responded coolly. I heard that the soup was quite spicy, wasn't it? I questioned. Not at all. It's not that spicy, she claimed. I went to the kitchen and tasted the soup left in the pot. It was indeed very spicy, enough to make my tongue tingle. A child can't eat something this spicy, I protested. Stop shouting. Children should eat what is served to them. That's how they learn discipline, she insisted. But even adults can struggle with this level of spiciness, I countered. Why are you yelling like that? The neighbors will hear, she scolded. Just then, my husband Simon arrived home. Usually he sides with his mother, but I believed that seeing our daughter in such a state, he would support me. However, my hope was quickly dashed. Noelle, you shouldn't be picky. Grandma worked hard to make that. Dad is disappointed. Apologize properly and reflect on your behavior, he said. His response left me feeling even more isolated and betrayed in my own home. My mother-in-law and husband were beyond comprehension. This is no joke. How can you feel nothing when our daughter is subjected to this? I can't endure this anymore. Please leave this house immediately. What? Calm down. Why do we need to leave? Because this is my family home. It's only fair that you two leave. I've told you, putting Noelle in the storage was part of her discipline. That's no reason to be kicked out of the house. That's right, exactly as Mom says. Sure, this is your family home, but I'm the one paying the rent. So technically, this house is mine now. You should be the one to leave, actually. The conversation was pointless. My anger had turned to dismay. Fine, I'll leave. And I want a divorce. That's fine. You never respected my mother. I never thought you were such an unreasonable woman. Then, I'll arrange for a formal rental agreement with my father for this house. Fine by me. Right in the center of the city, this large property with a spacious storage area. I thought the rent was high at first, but for $1,000 to have all this is a no-brainer. Mom and I will live here comfortably. My mother-in-law and husband were satisfied to continue living in this house. Incredibly, the matter of divorce didn't seem all that significant to him. The thought that I had spent 5 years married to such a man filled me with rage. And I could not forgive my mother-in-law for neglecting my daughter. If my husband doesn't think it's wrong, then he's complicit. I packed up and left the house immediately with my daughter. It was strange for me to be the one leaving, but I thought it would hurt my husband's pride eventually. My mother-in-law would surely come to regret this as well. As soon as I left the house, I called my father to explain the situation. Simon did what? So, what are you planning to do? I want you to make a rental agreement with Simon. Oh, using that approach? Then he'll have to leave if he doesn't comply. Before I even finished explaining, my father understood my plan. We are family, after all. We understand each other quickly. A month later, I was divorced from my husband and living in a monthly apartment with my daughter. After the divorce was finalized, I took the documents my father had prepared and went to see my ex-husband and former mother-in-law. Ah, you've come. Is that the contract? My ex-husband asked. Yes, it is, I replied. I was led up the front steps of the house by my former husband and mother-in-law. It was a strange feeling being guided into my own house. Sitting on the living room sofa, I placed the documents my father had prepared on the table. My ex-husband picked up the documents and began to read through them. He quickly pointed out a supposed mistake. Hey, this is wrong. The rent is listed as $10,000. Oh, really? I can't believe such a mistake, I said, pretending to be surprised as my ex-husband and former mother-in-law looked at me coldly. Yes, the rent is indeed $10,000. There is no mistake, I countered calmly. What? Stop joking. The rent was supposed to be $1,000. Are you trying to kick us out by setting such a high rent? I'm not falling for that. This contract is invalid. Don't be ridiculous. Bring a correct contract. My ex-husband seemed triumphant, believing he had seen through my scheme. However, unfortunately for him, there was no mistake in the documents, and I had indeed prepared them seriously and accurately. There is no mistake. This building includes the entire large property, and the first floor is not a residence but houses commercial tenants. It's common for commercial tenants to pay higher rent than residential tenants. When combined, the rent amounts to $10,000. Moreover, this is a central city location. That is the going rate for tenant fees in this area. What? Don't mess around? We're only renting the residential part upstairs. We have some stuff on the first floor, but we'll clear it out soon. That's not possible. My father stated that if he rents this place out, he will do so as a whole, not separately. If there were casual residents upstairs, it would reduce the interest of anyone wanting to rent the commercial space on the first floor. We were able to use this house previously because of my relationship with my father. Now that we're divorced and essentially strangers, there's no more special treatment. From now on, you'll need to pay the market rate for rent." "What? The rent has been $1,000 so far, hasn't it? Why?" "No, mother-in-law. Actually, the rent has been zero until now. My father allowed me to use it for free. Essentially, it was as if I was not paying any rent. I was supposed to pay him $10,000 annually for property taxes. In a way, that could be considered the real rent." "Zero rent? That can't be right. You said the rent was $1,000. "That was not true. I said that because I thought your pride would be hurt if you knew you were living here for free. Actually, I saved all the $1,000 you thought you were paying as rent. I also contributed $1,000 each month, saving a total of $2,000 monthly. We continued this for 10 years with the plan of eventually buying this house from my father. This way, everything would be settled transparently, and you would be satisfied. However, there's no need for that anymore. So please leave this house immediately. You can't afford to pay $10,000 a month, can you?" "Wait a minute. We can't just leave suddenly like that." "Well, you can give us a 2-month notice. In that case, you will need to pay 2 months' rent, totaling $20,000. Is that acceptable?" Ah. Realizing the contradiction in her own statements, my mother-in-law fell silent. "If you cannot pay the rent, please leave. If you do not, I will call the police." That's harsh. My ex-husband and former mother-in-law were trembling and looking down. Eventually, they decided to leave the house. They quickly packed their belongings and moved to an apartment. I had instructed them to vacate within 2 weeks by the end of the month, and they did as instructed. I warned them that staying even 1 day longer would result in an additional charge of $10,000 in rent, which seemed to motivate them. My ex-husband and former mother-in-law have already sold their house and are now living in a cramped apartment. They thought they could take the house from me and lived a lavish lifestyle, purchasing many expensive items. As a result, they faced sudden expenses and nearly depleted their assets, forcing them into living meagerly. Furthermore, they also need to pay child support every month, so they can't afford a luxurious living environment. Well, that is a consequence of their own actions, and there is no room for sympathy. Meanwhile, I have moved back into that house with my daughter, and we are living happily. Also, a trusted friend has started a cafe on the first floor, and I help out there occasionally. The cafe also includes a small space for merchandise, where some of the items from my store are displayed. Every day, being enveloped in the rich aroma of coffee is wonderful, especially when there's the scent of freshly baked cakes. Moving forward, I plan to continue living a fulfilling life, prioritizing my daughter while balancing work and personal life.
Don't you know the meaning of patience? Essentially, I must say you lack endurance. How much do you think I've been putting up with having a lazy wife? That's exactly my line. Hey, don't argue back every time. Don't blame me. It's over. I've reached my limit of patience. I'm sick of your lack of perseverance. If you can't stand it anymore, then leave. Let's get divorced. He threw the divorce papers on the dirty table. So, there was really no need to fight. With just one piece of paper, I can be free from this life. My name is Courtney. It has been a year since I married Jeff. The happy married life I dreamed of before marriage was then falling apart. What's for dinner tonight? My husband came home without a greeting, silently unlocked the door, and entered the living room with his presumptuous, heavy footsteps. He threw his roughly handled bag on the sofa and heavily sat down. Then, he took off his socks and stuffed them into the gap of the sofa. Nonsense. What in the world is this strange habit? It would make the sofa smell. Hey, I'm asking what's for dinner. Those socks. Huh? Don't stuff your socks in the gap. Oh, right. But if it bothers you, you can clean it up yourself, right? I got angry every time with him. He was good at increasing my stress. So, what's for dinner? Oh, and stop scattering things on the floor. I always tell you that. My husband pointed at a single receipt on the floor. I don't remember dropping it, but when I leaned over to pick it up, my husband sneered. I really don't understand leaving things on the floor. It shows how messy you are. I stopped reaching for it. Can I ask a question? Yeah, what? My husband made an obviously annoyed face. But I didn't care. What's the difference between leaving things on the floor and leaving used socks in the gap of the sofa? What's the difference between the floor and the sofa? Why is it wrong to leave things on the floor but okay for the sofa? It's the same action of leaving things, so why do you say they're different? What? Don't shift the blame to me. I'm not blaming you, just questioning. And according to your philosophy, the person who notices should deal with it. You found the receipt, right? So, why don't you pick it up? That's. Also, it's your turn to cook tonight. Why are you asking me about the dinner menu? Hey, I've been wondering since we got married, are you really Jeff? You said we would share household chores before we got married, didn't you? Did you forget? Or were you abducted by aliens and got replaced? If so, we need to rescue the real Jeff. So, who are you? And who's preparing dinner tonight? All right, I'll prepare it myself. He sighed deeply. Courtney, you've changed. With a look of exasperation, he continued to sigh. Every time he chopped using the knife, he'd sigh. Every time he lit the gas range, he'd sigh. He was really irritated by everything. Hey, where's the small pot? His new strategy, as I ignored his continuous sighs, was to keep asking where everything was. It's in the cabinet under the gas range. Where are the carrots? In the fridge, in the middle of the vegetable compartment. Where are the onions? Next to the carrots. Where's the oil? On the shelf under the gas range, on the right side. And the salt? On top of the gas range, in the seasoning rack, the second one from the right. Hey, can you help me? If you help with my tasks, I'll help you. I don't remember you helping me when it was my turn. If you want help, show some willingness to cooperate first. He looked dissatisfied, and in his anger, what he ended up making was stew with undercooked vegetables. There was neither rice nor bread, just the stew. Furthermore, while I ate from a small plate, Jeff proudly placed a large plate of stew in front of him. His smug expression exuded a trace of spite. Thank you. Let's eat. I said grace for the meal and quickly finished it. I cooked, but if you're not full, make something yourself next time. Haha, okay. I cheerfully moved to the kitchen to start preparing pasta, but the filthiness of the sink dampened my spirits. This is always how he is. Even if he reluctantly cooks, he never cleans up afterward. That burden is always on me. With renewed determination, I quickly finished cooking and ate in front of Jeff. It took me about 10 minutes to cook. Jeff's stew remained untouched. In the silence, after finishing my meal and returning from the bathroom, I saw Jeff picking garlic slices from the plate I had washed. I'm tired of this vulgarity. Before we got married, he was kind and cool. Initially, he was my superior at work and my mentor. When I made a mistake with an order, causing trouble for a client, and was being sternly scolded by my boss, he stood up for me. The moment he boldly protected me in front of everyone watching felt incredibly supportive. Our relationship evolved into romance, leading us to the present. But his casual remarks gradually cooled my feelings. At our wedding after party, a tipsy Jeff became talkative. When did you fall for me? He asked, and I initially wasn't sure which moment he was referring to. There were many charming moments, so I was smitten with him. You thought I was cool when I defended you in front of everyone, right? Actually, that mistake was my fault because I forgot to communicate something important, he revealed, and I felt utterly disillusioned. Following his words, the room fell silent, with everyone giving awkward smiles. The only one laughing heartily was Jeff. A colleague commented that it might be the alcohol talking, but I wasn't convinced. They say one's true feelings emerge when drunk. Just 1 week after the wedding, Jeff's true nature became apparent. He didn't keep his promises. They were all talk. And he stereotypically assigned household chores as a woman's role, revealing the superficial goodness in him had vanished. I thought of divorce as an option, but since it was just a week into our marriage, I was concerned about appearances. I am not inherently weak and have the courage to confront my husband. I wanted to explore the possibility of improving him. However, now, I've given up on that idea. I feel that I should not continue living such a draining life. I was ultimately unable to change my husband. A year into our marriage, I was looking for the right moment to suggest divorce. Then, a turning point came. My brother is coming over today, so please be nice. Why would he say that all of a sudden? I wanted to express my displeasure, but I held back. Having sisters myself, I understand the desire to meet when nearby due to a business trip, and I assume Jeff would feel the same. Alright, when is he coming? Probably around 3 p.m. You mean today, in the afternoon? Yes, that's right. Okay, got it. It must mean he's finishing work a bit early. I didn't think much more about the odd feeling I had. However, just after 3 p.m. that day, Jeff appeared at my workplace, looking flustered. Why are you here? Huh? Why? What about your brother? He called to say he couldn't get into the house. Well, that makes sense. If you're here, it means no one is at home. What are you doing here? I told you I was counting on you. Yes, you did, but… Huh? You mean I should leave work early to entertain your brother? What else would it be? I was astonished. This man is hopeless. Wait a minute. Whose brother is he again? Your brother, right? Why should I have to leave work early to take care of my brother-in-law? That's ridiculous. Seriously. But, no bits. I don't want to hear excuses. You take care of your brother. It's not my responsibility. Fine. I've had enough. Jeff left in a fury. I was exhausted. Yet, the thought that this might be a step toward divorce made me feel excited. Who can stay late tonight? Before I knew it, I was the first to raise my hand. I finished work and left the company after 9 p.m. Since Jeff asked me to, I hurriedly bought some drinks and snacks at the supermarket and went home. I'm home. As I opened the door to our house, a strong smell of alcohol hit me. It seemed they both had been drinking a lot. I've had concerns about my brother-in-law's misconduct ever since we got married. He started visiting more frequently after we got married. We lost our parents when we were young. Well, somehow. This house reminds me of our hometown. It feels warm. This is a line my brother-in-law often says when drunk. Thinking our home is like his childhood home, he believes it's acceptable to make a mess and spill drinks while drunk, resulting in a huge cleaning effort after his visits. And Jeff has never once helped with this. I felt angry when various places like the curtains, living room, bathroom, and even the blanket were soiled. The cleaning was always my task. Despite this, the sight of the two brothers enjoying their time together evokes a sense of brotherly bond forged over many years. That's why I've repeatedly restrained my anger. I cautiously opened the living room door, only to be greeted by a scene of chaos. Beer cans scattered across the floor, large stains from spilled liquids, fragments of chips, and greasy fingerprints on the television, all contributing to my overwhelming sense of fatigue. Oh, the foolish wife has returned. Exactly. Brother, please tell her more. Calm down. Don't worry, Jeff. I'm here now, so there won't be any more nonsense from your wife. Is this some kind of joke? Courtney, I'll teach you how to be a proper wife, so be grateful. I'm sorry, but I'll have to decline. Don't resist. Come sit here. Looking towards the sofa where my brother-in-law was pointing, I noticed 2 pairs of socks stuffed into the gap. So this is the true bond of brothers. As Jeff said, you are indeed a presumptuous wife. We need to correct this together. I'll be living here from now on, so listen carefully, Courtney. Do you understand? What do you mean, living here? This is our family home. It's only natural for the sons to live here. Are you serious? It seemed incredulous, but he was earnest. He was saying this is unequivocally his house, which my husband simply moved into. This house was passed down to me by my parents. It's not your family home. Haha. Young people these days. Listen, by marrying Jeff, you took our family name. Don't you understand the significance of that? From the moment you married into this house, it became our family's home. I couldn't help but laugh at that statement. My laughter only infuriated my brother-in-law further. What's with that reaction? I'm the eldest brother. You should obey me. You plan to stay in this house? I strongly object. What? You. Insolent. Insolent? Do you even understand what that means? And why are you making a scene in someone else's house during the day? What about your job? I quit my job to support my brother. Oh, I see. So you were fired for incompetence, then? It's no surprise that someone like you, who has never shown any kindness even in a relationship, wouldn't understand. I get it now. What did you say? That's discriminatory. I could sue for defamation. Go ahead, be my guest. I didn't say that about everyone, just to be clear. I know people who have little to no experience with romance, but they enjoy their lives. They simply aren't interested. Yet they could find a partner anytime they want because they have attractive personalities. But you constantly complain about women. You want a girlfriend, but your personality gets in the way. It's truly hilarious. Who would want to learn how to be a wife from someone like you? Haha, your lack of self-awareness is really amusing. What? Oh no. A man in his 40s started to cry, "What a hassle. Stop it. Your personality is the worst." So what? Even if that's true, what's it to you? I don't think I'm a good person. Don't you know the meaning of patience? Essentially, I must say you lack endurance. How much do you think I've been putting up with having a lazy wife? That's exactly my line. Hey, don't argue back every time. Don't blame me. It's over. I've reached my limit of patience. I'm sick of your lack of perseverance. If you can't stand it anymore, then leave. Let's get divorced. He threw the divorce papers on the dirty table. So, there was really no need to fight. With just one piece of paper, I can be free from this life. My husband wanted a divorce, and I accepted it. This would resolve everything. Feeling this, the tension in my body eased. What are you dawdling for? Sign it now. Looking at me, my husband wore a smug smile. What a self-centered person he is. Did he think everything would go his way? Humph, serve you right. Enough with the noise. They were crying just a moment ago, but after that the brothers were all smug. I understand. I'll sign now. And so, I moved the pen. I decided to ignore a certain section that caught my eye for now. A divorced woman, huh? Society can be harsh, especially since it's only been a year since the marriage. How impatient can a woman be? Yes, I've finished signing. I'll take this to the evening reception. And I did just that, marking the end of my marriage to Jeff. Days later, returning home, I found my ex-husband and his brother drinking in the living room. Why are you still here? Get out. What? You're the one who should not come here. This is trespassing. No, this is my house. You're the one squatting. My ex-brother-in-law remains silent, probably not wanting to be made to cry by me again. There's no reason for us to leave. Well then, please come this way. As I shouted, a person appeared in the living room, changing my ex-husband's expression instantly. What? Mr. Stewart, the general manager? Why are you here? I've heard everything. Now, take only what you need and leave. Yes, understood. Mr. Stewart was a significant figure who witnessed our marriage. He was our boss and directly above my ex-husband. As long as he worked at that company, defying Mr. Stewart was impossible. And my ex-husband hurriedly packed the bare minimum. Led by Mr. Stewart, he and his brother left the house silently. After changing the locks, I felt relieved but dizzy at the sight of the messy room. This was the result of my mistake in choosing him. I vowed not to make the same mistake again and got to work cleaning. A week later, Mr. Stewart informed me that my ex-husband and his brother had found another place to live. I then sent an official notice to their rental and workplace. The notice was about my ex-husband's infidelity. While filling out the divorce application, I noticed something in the guarantor section. A temporary employee from my husband's department was listed there. Why would a temp, with whom we had only professional contact, be a guarantor? The reason was clear. It was evidence of an inappropriate relationship. It was doubtful that evidence could be obtained after the divorce. But the temp brazenly shared intimate details of her relationship with my ex-husband on her social media. This bold action provided proof that an inappropriate relationship existed during our marriage, preparing me for this day. As a result, I received a substantial sum in compensation. $20,000 from my ex-husband's side and $5,000 from the temp. The amount far exceeded my expectations. One day, an important meeting was scheduled in the company's conference room. Mr. Stewart, the lawyer, myself, and of course, my ex-husband and the temp were present. The temp, like a drama heroine, made an emotional statement first. Jeff is not to blame. It's all on me. I fell for Jeff on my own. That's all. Let's stick to the main point. Are you willing to make the compensation payment? Compensation. Can it really settle everything? Yes, my client desires the payment. Her reaction was as expected. It's your cold attitude that drove Jeff away. You're truly heartless. I can't sense any compassion in you, she accused. This exchange was just part of a complex and emotional process that led to the divorce and the payment of compensation. Through this situation, I came to realize anew the complexities of human relationships and that legal resolutions don't necessarily bring peace of mind. Will you make the payment or not? I don't care about the money. Are you going to pay or not? I'll give this trivial amount away. She tossed $5,000 into the air and danced gracefully. I got to see the sight of my ex-husband frantically gathering the money from the ground. Jeff is still kind, even in such a situation. No, that's not it. He couldn't afford to fail in front of Mr. Stewart. He's extremely concerned about how others perceive him. Haha, their future will be interesting to watch. So, do you intend to pay the compensation? My ex-husband remained silent, looking down. If you have no intention to pay, What have I done to deserve this? It's about infidelity. We were doing fine. No, truly self-centered and frightening. Why do we have to divorce? What? I had a feeling, but he truly is a problematic person. I don't think we are divorced. No excuses, please. Just tell me if you have the desire to pay or not. I will pay. But I plan to use that money for another wedding ceremony with Courtney. What? It's ridiculous. To divorce over a mere fling. Do you know how much I've endured for you? Despite that, I love you, accepting all your whims. And yet, why repay kindness with betrayal? Jeff, you're divorced from your wife and with me. Be quiet. I'm talking to my wife, Courtney. Mistresses should know their place. Courtney, we're not divorced, right? No, the divorce proceedings are complete. If that's the case, this is just an argument, right? No, you don't file for divorce over just an argument. You were the one who proposed it. I found out about your affair when I saw the divorce papers. The guarantor section had her name. That's how I knew. It wasn't the affair that led to our separation. It was your unbearable character, breaking promises, trying to bring your brother into our home without asking, thinking only of yourself. Your character was the real problem. The divorce is final. Now, will you pay the compensation or not? Yes, the brothers are quick to show theirs. I truly loved you. As he cried out, my ex-husband threw the $20,000 on the table and stormed off. Jeff, wait for me. The temp, her hair disheveled, chased after him, waving her hands. What were we witnessing? The surprise was hard to hide. Wow, that was impactful. Sorry, I'll treat you to something next time. I felt both grateful and apologetic for involving my lawyer friend, a college classmate, in this ridiculous exchange. Mr. Stewart, I deeply apologize for any inconvenience caused. Well, you experience new things at any age. I'm grateful for this new experience. It might be a topic of conversation in the office for a while, but don't push yourself too hard. Yes, I'm fine. I love my job. Thank you very much for your support. As planned, the temp left the company after her contract ended. As for my ex-husband, he resigned after a transfer to another region. Eventually, the two of them didn't end up together. According to my lawyer friend, she's on social media chasing after another man, potentially facing another demand for compensation. It's almost like an illness. Having gained freedom through divorce, I was worried I might become emotionally unstable, but I'm perfectly fine. For now, I plan to focus on my work and move forward at my own pace. Upon arriving at the luxurious high-rise apartment, I spoke with the person at the front desk and obtained the keys to the apartment. Using the dedicated high-speed elevator, I headed to my home located at the top of the building. Wow, this is so nice. As the door opened, my sister-in-law burst in ahead of everyone else and exclaimed joyfully, "Well, let's start organizing our belongings." I called out, but no one seemed inclined to help. I had anticipated this, but it still wasn't a nice feeling. After the movers placed the items in their designated spots, I proceeded to unpack alone. I'll take the large room. The daughter-in-law can have the small storage room. That was how my in-laws were allocating rooms, but I ignored them and focused on unpacking. It's really a nice place. I wouldn't mind making this our last home. You're right. I'm glad to see Dad and Mom happy. Ryan and his family exchanged these words with beaming faces. It's like a dream to live in such a wonderful house. My sister-in-law said, overwhelmed with emotion. Perhaps it's time to reveal the truth. Huh? Whose house are you talking about? What? My name is Tiffany Brown. I am 32 years old. I work as a freelance illustrator. Although I used to be a full-time employee at a major publishing company, I chose independence and now primarily accept work from my former employer while also starting my journey as a children's book author. 2 years ago, upon marrying Ryan, we began living together in the apartment I had been residing in. The reason we lived there was because that house was actually my property, and Ryan moved in with me from his rental place. I lost my parents in a traffic accident during my childhood. Afterward, I was raised by my grandparents and bought this apartment when I started working. The funds for purchasing this home came from the compensation and insurance money related to my parents' death. My grandparents, who raised me, saved the money without using it and gave it to me for my future when I graduated from college. The reason I chose that apartment was because my grandparents decided to move into a nursing home. Wanting to spare me the burden of caregiving, they planned to enter the facility together. Respecting their wish, I chose this apartment for its convenient access and proximity to the facility they would be staying at. Although they said there were other uses for the money, it was the best choice for me. About 10 years have passed since I started living here. The 10 years spent with my parents and the other 10 I spent with my grandparents are equally significant to me, and I feel a special attachment to this house. I met Ryan at a friend's wedding after party. He was a colleague of my university friend's soon-to-be spouse. Since many of us happened to be of the same age, we decided to form a group and hang out occasionally. Several couples emerged within this group, and some even led to marriage, including us. Ryan always brightened up the surroundings and was a real mood maker. From our first meeting, I was charmed by him. I was drawn to his bright personality and found him attractive. However, that impression was superficial. And soon after marriage, I got to see his other side. While Ryan was a true gentleman when we were still dating, it became clear post-marriage that he was not the type to spoil a woman who was already his. In fact, he seemed to be the type who took advantage of people once they were in his palm. I'm living at your place. At least pay for the living expenses. Huh, what do you mean by that? If I weren't living here, the expenses would remain the same, right? So just continue paying for everything like you've done so up until now. There shouldn't be any problem with that, right? In fact, my apartment is already paid off, and there are no remaining mortgage debts. However, living here requires maintenance fees and a reserve fund for repairs, not to forget about the taxes. And since I own a car, I'm also paying for the parking space as well. Those are costs you would be paying anyway, whether I'm here or not, right? That's true, but then it shouldn't be a problem for you to continue paying them as you have been, right? This argument might seem logical at first glance, but it's actually not. But Ryan, you're going to be living in this house too, and we agreed to share the living expenses. I'd prefer if we could split them. When I said this, Ryan retorted angrily. You're so greedy. A real money grubber. I never thought you were that kind of a woman. I was stunned by his words and left speechless. I thought that we were on equal footing in our future life together as a couple. I thought that we would naturally bear the expenses of our shared home together. I'm not saying I won't pay anything. Of course I'll pay half of what I use. But you're the owner of this house, right? In other words, since this house is my property, I should bear all related expenses. I'll cover the amount related to my expenses. So isn't that arrangement fine? Faced with that, I reluctantly accepted his proposal. At the beginning of our marriage, Ryan did contribute to half of the living expenses, but only up to the amount I requested. The electricity bill was this much this month. That's quite a bit. Aren't you overspending by working from home? I had already quit my job during our dating period and became independent as a freelancer. I work from home most of the time, occasionally going out for meetings or to see friends. It doesn't seem fair. Ryan first expressed his dissatisfaction with the utility bills. What do you mean not fair? I asked. You see, I spend most of my day outside. Why am I obliged to pay for your electricity use while you work at home? He retorted. I was just dumbfounded by his logic and couldn't find words to reply. I only use electricity for a tiny fraction of time from when I get home until I go to sleep, so I shouldn't have to pay half, Ryan argued, and after that, he indeed paid only a minimal amount. He applied the same logic to the gas and water bills. At first, I had no choice but to accept it. Although Ryan's time at home was short, the utility bills obviously increased with his presence. But it was impossible to pinpoint the exact amount of how much he was using. While I did listen to Ryan's complaints, I obliged to his arguments since he was still willing to share living expenses with me. I now realize how foolish that decision was, but at that time, I thought it was for the best. I concluded it was better to accept a little bit of discomfort and have a peaceful marital life, rather than to argue over minor issues early in our marriage. Aside from finances, Ryan remained the cheerful and pleasant person he had always been. Although the issue of money was always a concern, I wasn't financially struggling even without his contributions. I felt it was more important to spend time in peace. However, that happiness gradually became unstable. Over time again? Give me a break, Ryan complained, showing a tendency to come home late. Are you sure you're okay? I think there's a guideline regarding overwork, stating that it's risky to exceed a certain number of hours per month. The Ministry of Health, Labor and Welfare recommends not exceeding 45 hours. You don't get it at all. Those numbers are just superficial. A good salesman doesn't only work the hours shown on the time card. Ryan said this with a sneer. Tiffany, you've experienced working all night before deadlines, haven't you? Yes, I have, but that's the reality. Don't be misled by numbers, and look at the actual effort. Having graduated from an art university and working as an illustrator, I honestly didn't understand the details of sales jobs. When he stated it so definitively, I had no choice but to agree. I understand. But please, don't overdo it. Thank you, Tiffany. I'm fine, I won't overdo it. Ryan said this while warmly embracing my shoulder. I tried to find comfort in Ryan's words, believing that trusting him would bring me some peace of mind. However, the betrayals by Ryan gradually accumulated over the years. People can react to sudden pain, but they become numb when it comes to pain inflicted over a certain period of time. Ryan's accumulated betrayals had become a heavy burden, yet I spent my days tolerating it bit by bit. In other words, I was hoping for peaceful days with my eyes closed. Then, all of a sudden, a major change came along. My family will be coming over, is that okay? One morning, Ryan suddenly suggested this. Your father and mother are coming? My sister will be coming too. I had once visited his family's home in the countryside before our marriage. It was a small house in a quiet rural town, showing some signs of wear and tear as time had passed, but his parents lived there together. At that time, his sister was already married and left the house, so I didn't get to meet her. Despite attempts to meet up, she was busy and couldn't come, leaving only a message of greetings. We didn't have a wedding ceremony and only took wedding photos, so that was the first and only time I got to meet Ryan's parents, but I haven't had the chance to meet his sister. Our friends threw us a celebration party, but because of that I hadn't had the chance to meet Ryan's relatives. I myself didn't have a deep bond with my family, so I didn't find it strange. However, Ryan's parents and sister visiting us felt out of the blue. A year had passed since our marriage, so it didn't seem unnatural for them to come over and see how we were doing. Without any suspicion about Ryan's suggestion, I accepted the visit. A week later, as promised, Ryan's family came over. "This is your house, Ryan? That's not very spacious." These were their first words upon entering the house. Indeed, it wasn't vast, but what else were they expecting? This house was originally purchased with the intention of living alone. It had 3 rooms, 2 bedrooms, 1 empty room, and a spacious living dining area. The empty room was mainly used as a guest room while the rest were used as a study and a bedroom. When Ryan started living with me, he said he needed space to work from home, so I offered my workspace as his study, and now I work in the living area. This space is sufficient for 2 people and I don't feel any inconvenience. Following Ryan's mother, his sister, whom I was meeting for the first time, entered our home. It's much smaller than I expected. "We're going to live here together? It's small, but I'd be happy if you could bear with it. There's a saying, home is where you make it. I can tolerate it for a while. Having a roof over your head is better than nothing." I wondered how long she was intending to stay here. At that moment, Ryan, with an irritated voice, gave an order. "Hey, don't just stand there. Hurry up and carry in Dad and Mom's luggage." Yes, sorry. Which luggage?" Expecting it to be just short-term stay luggage. Probably a duffel bag, I looked around inside the entrance, but there was nothing. "Where do you think you're looking at? It's outside." I rushed to the hallway only to find about 10 cardboard boxes stacked. White cardboard boxes for a visit to their son's house? I struggled to understand but realized I couldn't leave so many boxes in the hallway. Fortunately, none of the cardboard boxes were particularly heavy, and I was able to carry them all into the living room by myself. Since the living and dining areas are combined, there was ample space, and I managed to find a spot to stack them without getting in the way. At that time, Ryan and his family were chatting away. "After you finish carrying the luggage, let's have some coffee. Hurry up, everyone is tired." Overwhelmed by the situation, I reacted to Ryan's orders before I could think. Really, what a thoughtless daughter-in-law. "I'm worried about the future. I'll use this room." While I was making coffee, Ryan's sister claimed our bedroom as her own. "That's fine. I'll sleep in the guest room with Mom and Dad. I'm happy I get to sleep together with Ryan after such a long time. Nice family time." Ryan and his family seemed to enjoy themselves as if I wasn't there. Our house only has a bedroom, guest room, and the room Ryan uses as his office. Where am I supposed to sleep? And how long will this situation last? It seems that people cannot think normally when faced with situations that exceed their common sense. While I was in a daze, everything got settled. With the arrival of the in-laws began an awkward everyday life. "When will dinner be ready?" "I'm sorry, I'm preparing it right now." "You're really slow." I wonder how Ryan can tolerate such a wife. Ryan's family spent their days lounging around the house, not helping with anything. They treated me like a servant. At first, I thought I just had to endure it for a few days and played the obedient wife. However, as I overheard conversations between Ryan's family and him, it became clear that this would be a long-term situation. All of a sudden, reality hit me. To put it simply, Ryan's family had fled their hometown. This was because Ryan's sister had returned home after getting a divorce. The reason for the divorce was her infidelity. She had affairs with many people. As a result, everything came to light. She was sued by her ex-husband and the spouses of her lovers, leading to her inability to pay, and thus fled here. Ryan had previously told me that his family owned their home, but that was also a lie. The house they lived in originally belonged to his mother's parents. Ryan's parents, incapable of providing for themselves, moved in with them, and after his mother's parents died, they just stayed there. The actual owner was Ryan's mother's brother, who had repeatedly asked them to leave, but they stayed, using their residency rights as leverage. Although he wanted them to leave, he had his own residence and never forced his sister's family out, despite making requests for them to vacate. However, when Ryan's sister returned home with a huge alimony to pay, the parents suddenly decided to sell the house to raise funds. When his mother's brother found out, he was furious and considered legal action, prompting them to flee with all their belongings to our house. Those belongings were the 10 boxes I struggled to carry in that day. That was all they had. I don't know nor care what's inside those boxes, but it seems they don't contain anything of value. Overall, they came to us penniless, and they seemed to plan to depend on us for the foreseeable future. Among that family, only Ryan was different. He was good at studying, graduated from university with a scholarship, and didn't seem to belong to such a family at first glance. He presented himself as a refreshing young man, landed a job at a somewhat reputable company, and then met and married me. I couldn't see through Ryan's or his family's true colors. I have no parents and am all alone. I own my home and have a job. For Ryan, I must have been an ideal target. This was no laughing matter. Now that I had it all figured out, I had no intention of being submissive. I absolutely could not accept being manipulated by such a terrible family. I pondered how to resist and immediately started to take the following day. To do that, I first had to pretend to be obedient on the surface. I must not let Ryan or his family catch on to my plan. I'll let them be off their guard and then seize the opportunity. Just as they appeared out of the blue, I too will strike suddenly. While obliging to the in-laws' demands, about a week later, Ryan's sister made a request. "Lend me some money." She said this while extending her hand. She was very direct when asking for money. I was angry but decided not to rebel for now. I handed over some cash to Ryan's sister. "Is this all? Don't you have more?" It's way too sudden, so I don't have more on hand." "Then, a card will do." "Absolutely not. If I give her the card, there's no telling how it will be used. I can't lend you the card. I'll withdraw some money from the bank tomorrow, so please wait until then." I managed to placate Ryan's sister's unreasonable demand with that promise. No matter what happens, I have no intention of handing over my card. That night, after Ryan came home, he criticized me for it. "You could have just lent her the card. You're really stingy with money." I was surprised by his criticism, but I had my reasons, so I decided to apologize. "I'm sorry. I was worried that lending her the card might lead to trouble." "What kind of trouble?" "If she used a card under a different name, your parents might have gotten into trouble for unauthorized use." I was too scared to hand it over. Ryan seemed convinced by that explanation. "Then please make a family card for them to use." Okay. I agreed on the surface, but I had no intention of actually making one. About a month later, Ryan asked about the progress of the family card. I had given some money to the in-laws a few times, but perhaps Ryan, tired of the nagging, was eager to get the card. "I'm sorry, but it seems I can't make that card." I said this while feigning disappointment. I hadn't applied for a family card at all and actually felt no regret. "Why not?" "It seems that they are considered as relatives and not as immediate family. It appears that temporary residence isn't sufficient. The in-laws had imposed themselves on my home without permission, and no official procedures for living together were completed. Since they haven't transferred their residency here, it's impossible to get a residence certificate." "Is that true?" Faced with this fact, Ryan reluctantly seemed to accept it. "Then, if we transfer their residency, would that solve it?" "Yes, since they're going to be here for a long time anyway. Hurry up and get the procedures done." Brazenly, the in-laws demanded that I handle the paperwork, but considering they'll be staying long-term, I feel this house is a bit small for that. "That might be true. That might be why you've been hardly coming home recently, Ryan." At that, Ryan frowned. "I'm busy with work and stay until late, so I spend nights at a nearby hotel. Work must be tough. How about we move somewhere else?" Ryan and his family were taken aback by my suggestion. This house was originally purchased for me to live alone, and while it's still manageable with Ryan, it's indeed cramped with the current number of people. "That's true. Please take a look at this. Wouldn't you like to move to a residence like this?" Saying that, I presented a brochure for a new apartment in a newly developed subsidy center. It was a high-rise apartment. The brochure showed photos of an apartment located on the highest floor of the building. The spacious interior offered a panoramic view of the cityscape through large windows. How did you manage to get such a magnificent apartment? Feeling cramped in our current home, I made a bold decision. I sold this house and combined the inheritance from my parents with my savings to purchase this new place. I see. While our current home is nice, the new one is even better. Initially skeptical, Ryan and his sister relaxed their expressions when they learned the purchase was complete. You're quite something. My view of you has changed. I feel like now we can finally accept you as a family member. The in-laws also nodded in agreement, smiling. Thus, the discussion about the move went smoothly. A month later, the moving day arrived. While I felt a bit sad to say goodbye to the house I had lived in for so long, it was a step toward a new beginning. After loading the truck with our belongings, we took a taxi to the new residence. Upon arriving at the high-rise apartment and speaking with the front desk attendant, I received the keys to the apartment. Using the dedicated high-speed elevator, we headed to our new home at the top of the building. Wow, this is amazing. As the door opened, Ryan's sister rushed in first, exclaiming with joy, "Let's start organizing our belongings." I called out, but no one seemed inclined to help. I had anticipated this, but it still wasn't a nice feeling. After the movers placed the items in their designated spots, I began unpacking alone. I'll take the large room. Daughter-in-law can have the small storage room. That was how my in-laws were allocating rooms, but I ignored them and focused on unpacking. It's a really nice place. I wouldn't mind making this our last home. You're right. I'm glad to see Dad and Mom happy. Ryan and his family exchanged these words, smiling. It feels like a dream to live in such a wonderful house. Ryan's sister said, overwhelmed with emotion. Perhaps it's time to reveal the truth. Huh? Whose house are you talking about? I asked, feigning surprise. What? This isn't your house. This is the house I purchased to live with my grandparents. But you asked us if we wanted to live in such a house. Ryan's sister protested loudly. Yes, I did ask if you wanted to live here. But that was merely a question of interest, not an offer to live together. Indeed, I said that, but I never proposed living together. I can't imagine living with these people forever. I would like you all to leave immediately. I am the owner of this house. As the landlord, I am asking you to leave, so please comply before this escalates into a problem. Don't be ridiculous. Ryan, his face turning red, stamped his foot in anger. Just be quiet and obey me. This house is for me and my family. If you don't like it, you can leave. Yeah, get out. Exactly. Ryan and his family were pressuring me to leave this house. I used the wall-mounted intercom to call the concierge. Excuse me, there are intruders in my house trying to kick me out. Please come immediately. With those words, an alarm sounded throughout the room. What's going on? So noisy. Stop it right now. The security staff, alerted by the call, arrived promptly in the room. That's the benefit of living in a luxury apartment. These people are the security staff of the apartment. If you don't leave, I'll have no choice but to call the police. As the doorbell rang and the security staff inquired about the situation, the in-laws started to panic. They must have realized that my warning was not a bluff. Even though the security staff had arrived, the in-laws desperately tried to talk things over. I decided to listen to what they had to say. I wanted to know what Ryan had been telling his family. He portrayed me as a pitiable woman with no relatives, claiming that without him, I couldn't sustain myself and that it was okay to treat me like a housemaid. This testimony from the in-laws was valuable, so I decided to be lenient. In fact, when giving money to the in-laws, I had them sign a document stating the amount I gave them. To put it simply, it was a promissory note. Ryan told me I need proof that I've given you the money. Otherwise, I will be scolded. If you sign, I'll give you as much money as you need. Presented with this condition and realizing they could get money, the in-laws readily signed. Thankfully, I secured evidence of the loan amounts. Originally, I planned to get the money repaid from the in-laws, but realizing it would be difficult, I decided to make Ryan responsible and urge him to leave the apartment. You're safe for now. If you leave immediately, I'll forget about the money. But if you step foot here ever again, I'll demand the full amount of the borrowed money. As I waved the promissory note, the in-laws finally gave up and left. I'm Tiffany's husband. I have the right to live here. I won't leave. Ryan insisted on staying and refused to leave. Then, let's talk this over right here, right now. Alright, let's talk. If you do anything strange though, I'll call security immediately. After expressing my gratitude to the security staff, I dismissed them for now. Why are you doing this? Do you hate my family that much? Of course. Appearing suddenly and treating me like a slave, I firmly countered Ryan. Alright, If you hate it so much, I'll ask my mother and the rest of the family to leave. But I should stay here, right? I was just appalled by his words. He was planning to abandon his family just to secure his own residence. Such a low life. No, you need to leave this place too. Why? We're husband and wife. No. I presented Ryan with a folder. What is this? Ryan's face went pale as he looked through the folder. Quite a young one, isn't she? Apparently, you've been spending several days a week together. The folder contained evidence of Ryan's infidelity. There were numerous photos of them walking intimately and entering a hotel together. Ryan had been having an affair with that woman shortly after our marriage. You planned to proceed with our divorce and move to your previous apartment, correct? That's a lie. Who told you that? I activated the voice recorder I had in hand. His lover's voice filled the room, and Ryan froze. It was evidence obtained by a private investigator. The investigator had contacted the other party, informed her that Ryan was married, and recorded her reaction. The woman boasted about how, once I was out of the way, she would live in Ryan's apartment with him. She believed Ryan was in the midst of divorce proceedings and that I was the obstacle because I wouldn't agree to the divorce. That left Ryan exhausted from dealing with his family and ultimately resulting in me leaving the house voluntarily. The woman was convinced she was Ryan's only true love and that his relationship with me was completely over. She laughed, saying, "True love will eventually win." But as soon as she realized she was speaking to an investigator, she started to defend herself. She felt deceived by Ryan, thinking their relationship was over. She was willing to reveal everything in exchange for not pursuing damages against her. When asked by the investigator what I would do based on her information, I said, "It depends on what you tell me," and she ended up disclosing everything, even information not requested. All of it was recorded on the voice recorder. True love turned out to be quite fragile. I've got solid evidence. This could lead to a substantial settlement. Ryan collapsed to the floor, drained of strength. I've sent your belongings to her apartment, so you can live there from now on. Please leave now. I contacted the concierge again and had Ryan, who had lost all his strength, removed from the room. As promised, I decided not to pursue damages against the lover. Ryan's dishonest actions became clear through the testimony provided. As a result, I was able to secure a substantial settlement from him. The amount was more than enough to take forgiveness into account. In return, I informed his and her parents and their workplace about his actions. Since there was no promise to keep the information secret, sharing it was not a problem. She was Ryan's subordinate, and they had grown close while working together. It might have been a touching story had he not been married. After informing the company, they admitted to their lack of management and apologized. To protect their image, the company had her resign, while Ryan was demoted and transferred to another subsidiary. The two had engaged in personal conduct during work hours, causing damage to the company. Such actions required appropriate measures. Rumor has it that the family is now living together in her apartment. They claimed it's your fault that we are in this situation. Take responsibility. So they reside in that apartment together. Ryan took out a loan to pay me the alimony. He is now struggling to manage his finances and repay the debt. I anticipate that he'll soon be forced to ask his family to leave due to financial difficulties. Ryan thought of me as being pitiful caring for my grandparents in a facility. But the reality was slightly different. My grandparents are indeed in a facility, but it's a high-end one for a comfortable lifestyle. They once ran a business and planned to pass it on to my young parents. But after their early demise, they decided to retire, handing over the business to a trusted individual. I've always loved painting since my student days, winning many awards. When I expressed my desire to work in art, my grandparents decided against passing their company to me, choosing to live in a luxury facility by their choice. I pursued a career related to art and am now recognized as a children's book author. My books have been successful, gaining me a certain level of fame. Since parting ways with Ryan, my fortunes seem to have turned for the better. He must be regretting now, knowing the truth. I used the profit from selling the apartment, my parents' inheritance, and royalties from my work to purchase that high-rise apartment. I hope to live with my grandparents again, so I decided to act on that desire. The facility will remain available for them going forward, where they can receive proper support if they ever need it in their daily lives. However, for now, they are both maintaining their health. The success of my books has allowed me to express my gratitude to my grandparents. It looks like we will enjoy a happy life together for a while longer. Despite an unfortunate encounter, that experience has paved the way for a hopeful future ahead.